you for joining us today for Kaizen in Theory, Stuck in Practice, a Lean HE exploration. So today what we're going to do is we're going to explore how we as CI professionals can move from looking at Kaizen in theory and actually putting it into some meaningful real life practice in HE. So we've just got under 2 hours now together, and what we're going to explore today is, if you don't mind, Beth, thank you. Yeah, we're going to have a little look at our confidence levels with Kaizen, which we've already done with our benchmark Mentimeter at the start. We're going to learn or refresh our knowledge about Kaizen. So like Beth mentioned, this is not a really in-depth session on Kaizen, aimed at maybe like black belt level. This is getting a very general sort of entry level type of Kaizen concept, so that we're all sort of starting from the same foundational base. We want to then really delve into the challenges and opportunities for Kaizen that present themselves in higher education. Then we're going to focus on the top tips and tricks to help you run a successful Kaizen event. And then we're going to start thinking about where we could actually apply Kaizen in real life. So actually thinking about real problems, sort of real challenges that we're facing, that we could maybe use as our sort of first baby steps towards doing a Kaizen if you've never done it before, or maybe going back in there and rethinking a problem that you couldn't quite resolve first time around. So in terms of a bit of housekeeping for the session, if you don't mind moving on to the next slide, please, Beth. Just really to say, questions and comments are welcome throughout the session. Obviously, because we're recording, your name will probably appear on screen and your question or comment. So if you're not comfortable with that, maybe leave it till the end of the session. But obviously, please do drop them into the chat at any time, or raise a hand. We're happy to stop and answer anything. We'll try and obviously answer as much as we can. But if we do run out of time, we can carry on afterwards and have a bit of a chat. We are going to try and have a bit of a comfort break for about 5 or 10 minutes, so don't worry, it won't be totally just sitting down looking at the screen. And we just ask, really, if you can try and dedicate the next, hour and a half to 2 hours to just focus on this session. Try and get rid of any distractions out of the room, whether it's your phone or your email inbox pinging away. We think there's a lot that you'll get out of this session in quite a short amount of time. So I'm going to hand over to Linda Spinks from Lean HE, who's going to introduce you to Lean HE more generally.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Linda Spinks. I'm the Continuous Improvement Lead at the University of Cambridge, but I'm also the co-chair of the England and Wales Steering Group, and I sit on the European Steering Group as well. So for those of you who are new to Lean in Higher Education, it's a global community of practice. It's a network. And it's all about sharing our knowledge, supporting each other, sharing methodologies, sharing best practice. The link to the Lean HE website is there. And as Beth said, this recording of this session is going to be part of the Lean HE conference, which is taking place next week. I will speak more about that at the end of the session and let you know where you can find further information. But other than that, I'm looking forward to the session. I attended the last one. It was great. And I certainly hopefully had some influence in getting it run again. So looking forward to it.
Thanks, Linda. And just really for a quick bit of context, why are we running this session? Why now? It really started at an event back in December 2024 when Beth and I first met, and we got chatting about this. It's something I've had a lot of personal interest in, and Beth has a lot of experience of doing this in the private sector. So I think it does go to show kind of the power of these networking opportunities, that it then snowballs into other, types of events and opportunities, which is fantastic. I think there was a general feeling that this method of Kaizen often gets stuck in the theory. We talk about it a lot. It sounds great. We read about it as part of our, official formal training that we do in Lean. But we don't really seem to get an opportunity to do it in higher education. And that might be something to do with the type of sector, the type of I suppose the type of business the higher education is very different. So we really wanted to run a session to find out, well, what are our peers thinking or doing in this area? And just really as well to spell out, we're not experts, you know, as I've just mentioned. I'm pretty much a novice. Beth is a black belt and got experience in the private sector doing this, but neither of us has really done it in HE. I've started to do something very recently since the first time we did this session, but it is still very much early days. So we're really keen to hear from you guys about what you think of Kaizen, and maybe you're much further along with using this this concept in reality. So I'll hand over to Beth now to talk a bit more about Kaizen itself.
Thank you. Not confusing at all that we're both called Beth for everyone else, or for ourselves, in fact. So thought we'd start with a little bit of an introduction to what Kaizen is in general. So those of you that have had a chance to look at the Cambridge introductory video may recognize some things that I have quite obviously stolen from there. So Kaizen is two-part word. So much in Lean comes from the Japanese words that were originally used by Toyota. And this original concept of Kai is about taking apart and making new, and Zen is about thinking about, but specifically with the aim of assisting others. So when we're looking at Kaizen, we're thinking about the fact that it's a philosophical principle as well as an event practice. And based on that belief that everything can be improved, we're really looking to focus on small improvements, particularly within Kaizen events, thinking very limited amount of technological requirement in those improvements. So again, we can move at pace. And it's something that really should involve everyone. So not something that's done behind closed doors by a couple of individuals, but something that is much more visible, much more transparent. We need at least all of those roles listed on the slide there, making sure that you've got that strong facilitation to help guide people through the methodology and get to where they need to get to within the time frame that you have. So a Kaizen event specifically, which is what we're going to focus on today, it's very much about that collaboration. It's bringing those people together, those subject matter experts, those process experts, decision makers as well, hopefully, as well as that strong facilitation to get people through this methodology to apply the tools appropriately, and then to be able to get to a tangible outcome within a focused and specific, or sort of very intensive amount of time. So this is a one-off event, not something that necessarily repeats, and really aiming all of that effort around problem solving. So we want to have a specific problem going into a Kaizen event rather than trying to come up with one once we're all together. It is very collaborative. It is not something that you can do independently. It is something that requires input from a lot of people, and that discussion is really critical. It's more of a one-off event rather than something like a project. I am repeatedly saying the words continuous improvement is not a project in Manchester University at the moment, and we're not necessarily looking to get right to the end of delivering a solution. We're more looking to come up with an idea for what the solution could be. May have an opportunity to do action planning within the Kaizen event, or it may be something that needs to sit outside of that, but ultimately you're looking to get to some solutions to your problem and then understand how can you implement those outside of the event structure.
Thanks, Beth. So in terms of why use Kaizen in the first place, we think Kaizen has got real great potential in a higher education context to help clarify your organisational goals. So I think it's really asking, well, what are we trying to achieve here? When you're doing a Kaizen event, you really need to feel that there's a clear sense of purpose and a clear specific problem that you're focusing on. So for instance, rather than maybe like a vague idea of, oh, we're going to redesign the applicant experience, you would actually maybe focus on something much more specific, such as we're going to eliminate queries about this particular question in our application, form or process, which is causing us X amount of delays or things like that. So it's getting really, really specific and into the nitty-gritty. It can help to really break down silos. So because problems are addressed collaboratively and the improvements are shared with the wider organisation, there's a sense of like co-design and co-creation rather than something being imposed upon people. And I think that really helps if you're potentially dealing with a very difficult change culture, where it's difficult to get change going and to make it stick. Which kind of leads on to the next point. It definitely helps facilitate cross-departmental collaboration. And I think this is really promising in higher education, where we tend to have a lot of similar roles that can be dispersed across different departments and different functions, but fundamentally are, delivering the same service or the same process. And I think finally as well, I think this is probably something we're all maybe aware of from our kind of theoretical understanding of Kaizen. It holds some promise of delivering improvements faster, but there's a bit of a caveat to this. It's if you have the key decision makers involved in your Kaizen event, or at the very least sponsoring and being very proactively involved and aware of what a Kaizen event is doing or has delivered. So I'll give an example. In higher education, we have a lot of policies, but an idea to say make a little tweak to a policy is maybe not as simple as it seems, and it might require, say, a senior sponsor to implement something or to back you up in making what actually is a minor change, maybe one sentence or two, but has very big repercussions, or it requires senior sign-off. So I think it's key to get the right people involved in Kaizen, which we'll get to, later in our breakout activities. So these are obviously all the opportunities, all the great things that Kaizen could do for us. However, we know there's a big but, because there's evidently barriers that prevent many of us from embarking on a Kaizen event at all, or maybe we've tried them and they didn't go quite to plan, things like that. So this, I think, leads very nicely onto our breakout activity, in which we're going to go into breakout rooms on Teams, and we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the challenges of running a Kaizen event in your organisation. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes on that. We're going to think about things like, what challenges do you face when you're trying to run a Kaizen event? If you haven't yet done a Kaizen event, that's absolutely fine. You may have not even considered doing one. That's absolutely fine. But I suppose it's asking yourself fundamentally, what is maybe stopping you right now from doing one? And then sort of the other half of that, we'll start to think about, okay, well, in terms of opportunities for running Kaizen in your organisation, what type of problems do you see at the moment that you think might be a good candidate for a Kaizen event? And what would make it easier for you to do a Kaizen event in your organisation? So what I'm going to do is, I have shared in the chat a link to a Miro board, and I am going to share my screen right now just to introduce you to it. So don't worry if you've never used Miro before in your life, or you haven't got an account, that's absolutely fine. Do let me know in the chat if anyone's having issues seeing what I'm sharing. But effectively, what we'll do is each breakout room will be led by a facilitator. So group 1 will be led by Beth, group 2 by Linda, group 3 by Rachel, group 4 by Will, group 5 by Tammy, and group 6 by myself, the other Beth. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these Miro spaces to record our reflections on the challenges that we feel we're facing, as well as the opportunities that we're starting to think about, or what essentially we need in order to make a Kaizen event happen. So if anyone is familiar with Miro, you basically just use your mouse to zoom in, to scroll in, to zoom in and out of the screen. But if you do get lost, if you go to the bottom right hand corner, see where it has the percentage sort of summary there. If you click on that and click fit to screen, it'll zoom you back out so you can see everything that's on the Miro board in case you get lost. And if you don't know exactly where you are for an activity, if you know, say, for instance, you're in group 3 with Rachel, just click on this hyperlink here and it'll just zoom you into the boards. Well, I say in theory, let me just ungroup this. Okay, just ignore that advice. It seems there's been an issue in how I've set up the Miro board. But if you do get lost, please use the Zoom navigation bar in the bottom right and just click on that, click fit to screen. And then if you know you're in group 3, you can just zoom in to the green post-its or sticky notes over here. So if you do have any issues and you get a bit lost, just drop a message in the chat and I'll come and help where I can. So please don't panic. So what I'm going to do is I will put everyone into the breakout rooms, let everyone get settled in. So in total, if we could spend 20 minutes on this activity, 10 minutes discussing challenges, 10 minutes discussing opportunities, and your facilitators will also be there to help you with the Miro board. So yeah, if everyone can click that link, and then I'll put everyone in their breakout rooms. Hopefully that's clear. And thanks again for bearing with us with all the technical issues.
Very unfamiliar concept that's not currently being used. We had a bit of a discussion of how we can sort of sell that or market that to people so that they can see the value of what we are aiming to do. Our own unfamiliarity with Kaizen and running Kaizen events, again, could be a bit of a barrier. If we haven't got that opportunity to practice, then we're not going to be comfortable jumping straight into delivery. So those are a couple of things from us that we've been chatting about. I think on the opportunities side, the value of, again, having a network or a community of practice that we can talk to, we can get advice from, is huge. We've got definitely opportunities with things like strategy refreshes at university or new strategies, positioning continuous improvement, positioning process standardization, huge opportunities for us to take advantage of. Also, colleagues wanting quicker pace of change. Something like Kaizen can deliver change much more quickly, potentially, than your standard waterfall project. Examples of success as well. If we've got those to share with colleagues, we think we can, again, change minds a little bit more and convince them this is a great thing to do. And also how we would love to be able to get continuous improvement, lean in whatever form, into job descriptions would be massively valuable, into actual requirements for everyone's day to day. If it was part and parcel of what you're expected to do, thanks Linda, then we'd get much more traction with it. So that was what we were looking at. Let's move over to group 2. Linda, that's you.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, common themes coming out. We were a small but perfectly formed group. There were just 3 of us in our room, so but really good conversation. Time being one of the biggest challenges. People don't have enough time. And equally, there's too much focus on the big transformational projects, the big stuff, the big shiny new things going on, rather than the small incremental changes that we're in the business of looking at. Not enough dedicated improvement people with skills and knowledge to do this stuff, and understanding of tools. And that sort of balances with, lack of staff buy-in. What's this lean stuff all about? A bit of fear that, lean had a bad press. People think that they might lose their jobs if they get involved in this stuff, if things become so efficient. It's trying to take people on the journey with us rather than doing stuff to them. And just generally where people are strapped for time, even just to get them thinking about lean, never mind getting them involved in Kaizen events. In terms of opportunities, have a member of staff with the expertise to lead it, demonstrating that done properly, that it can save time, can help things be better, faster, easier. and use that by sort of demonstrate that where success has happened. I always use the example, you push on the open doors, get some results, and then people start peeping out around the edge of the closed doors to see what all this good stuff is about. It might be sometimes, rather than, universities are in sort of quite financial straits at the minute, but it might actually be cheaper to buy in short-term resource to facilitate rather than fund permanent resource, if that question is on the table. One of the opportunities is we could use the fact that the current economic situation, this stuff will help, and sell that story. So right, rather than see it as a negative, see it as an opportunity to promote the improvement work and the Kaizen activity. And I think that covers everything. Thinking about working opportunities to, like this session today, but on a more practical basis, collaborate with other universities. So rather than just be in our individual university silos, because that's the beauty of being in higher education. That's one of the things that sort of hooked me in and has kept me here for 20 plus years, is that we can collaborate. It's not frowned upon.
Yes, absolutely. I have to say that resonates with me. I've nearly coming up 7.5 years in HE, and absolutely, I love the fact that we'll share things with each other. It's just not something that happens in the private sector for more obvious reasons. Okay, thank you very much for that. Rachel, group 3, how did your discussions go?
Quite similar sentiments to as already shared by yourself and Linda. Will come as no surprise. But to build on a few of those points, we talked about getting stakeholder capacity to attend not just the Kaizen event, but also to enact any change following, and making sure that those stakeholders were the correct stakeholders for the event that you're running. So, for example, are they equipped to make decisions, or their seniority level, is that kind of at the right level, or is it that you're needing to know the specifics of a process, and therefore you need the process operators in the room, metaphorically, rather than those decision makers. So making sure you've got the right group of people from the off to actually be able to facilitate that change. Leading on from that as well, making sure that those people don't go too big in their thoughts, that having that kind of defined scope rather than just leaping to a solution of a huge IT project that isn't feasible for such a discrete area of work, perhaps. So making sure that those kind of the scope is laid out at the beginning, and that people are kind of fully on board with making a time-sensitive, time-critical change. Some of the opportunities with that is we talked about how in the past, task and finish groups have tasked for a very long time and not necessarily finished. And so whether we can kind of flip the ask of people, and whether it's kind of would be more beneficial to say, could you carve out an entire week to dedicate to this big knotty problem rather than attempting to incrementally chip away at it? Is that kind of an easier sell on people's time in that sense? Kind of other opportunities is just making sure that kind of that change management, you kind of highlighted it, Linda, is in people's role descriptions, that people are allowed, permitted to spend time on working on change management projects, change management events, rather than it just being seen as something that's quite easy to say, I don't have time for that. Like, I'm just keeping my head above water here. I'm just getting the day job done. People do actually have that carved out capacity there for them. I think that covers everything. I don't know whether that's the group, if I've missed anything out there.
Well, do feel free to pop any more thoughts in the chat as well as we're going on. Thank you very much for everyone. We're going over to Will's group now. Will.
Yes, lots of similar things, which I won't go over again. But yeah, those kinds of issues that have been brought up already, I think every group's probably noticed. So just from ours, we talked a bit about language and perception in quite a few ways. That Kaizen, quite literally a foreign word, can sometimes be a little bit off-putting for some, or can make some people skeptical for whatever reason. And perception of what these sessions are actually for, the expectations of what the outcomes will be, thinking about this is going to solve everything if we come along, and knowing what to expect when you come along. So I think that's certainly a challenge of making sure that you prep your participants appropriately. Something else that came up, I know it's been mentioned elsewhere, about fear of change, change fatigue. It's been alluded to that it's a challenging time for the sector at the moment, and I think any talk of change often people can see it as euphemistic for more unpleasant changes to happen in their workplace. So those kinds of concerns we saw as challenges, as well as just lots of very practical things, depending on the group you're bringing in together, finding physical space to carry out the activity, depending the time of year, how busy your campus is, and how easy it is to get rooms. So all manner of things. But I know there are still facilitators after me, so I'll leave it there. So I've got something else to share.
Thanks. I think that logistics as well can be such a sticking point for us. Just getting a room. Once you've got all the people and got in their diaries, can you even get them physically together? So annoying barriers that trip us up. Tammy, over to your group 5.
Thank you. So again, a lot of duplication, but I think it's really interesting to see what themes are coming out. So timings, roomings, availability. And also thinking about how agile we can be and how reactive we can be. So I know rooming is a big issue, isn't it? Because timetabling happens at certain times of the year. And when you're running these types of events, you want to have a good space where you can be creative. You've got the ability to decorate every single surface you can find to make it as visual as possible. But then I think as well, it's knowing where to start. So one of the things that we talked about in our group was having a bit of time where you maybe have a recognised part of your DMAIC phase, if you're using DMAIC, so that you have that as a separate thing where you think about what are your priorities before you get to the Kaizen event, so that you are able to bound that inquiry very well. But I think also setting expectations about what is and isn't achievable is really important too, because we can't solve everything. But then another thing that I thought was really interesting is that we talked about, is it actually a problem or an action or a decision? So some of you may have come across Kepler-Trago and their approach to problem solving. And sometimes a lot of the things that we see as problems aren't actually problems, they're decisions or actions. So it's knowing who has the agency to make that decision or carry out that action or bring people together to solve that problem. I think that was really important. So yes, great stuff. Really good conversation that we had. Thank you to the people in our room.
Great, thanks. Sounds very interesting as well. And I recently discovered Kepler-Trago, so that's fresh in my mind. Last but not least, Beth, is your connection working better now that you've moved?
It seems to, yeah. I've gone downstairs and that seems to have done the trick. I think similar to all the other points that have been raised, there's lots of similar themes about time and availability. And I really like Tammy's point about, is it actually a problem or a decision or action that needs to be taken? And I think that leads very nicely to a point that we were discussing in our group about it's not really a cultural norm or standard cultural behaviour in universities to do things quickly. And, we tend to have a culture of ruminating over things. We're very much bound by committee schedules. So it's how do you kind of translate a concept like Kaizen into the HE context, which is still very much quite traditional, even though we tend to be universities tend to be leaders in their fields in lots of areas. When it comes to how we operate and how we change, still very much quite old-fashioned. So yeah, it's a difficult problem to solve, and Kaizen might be the type of tool that could help with culture change. There was also a point made as well around finding people who were enthusiastic. So not just this issue of getting the right people in the room, but actually trying to just find where the enthusiasm is first, because that's half the battle. And utilising an existing community of practice seems to be a really good way of finding those people who are up for a bit of a challenge, trying something new. Obviously, some institutions are very, very evolved with their community of practices, and others are still very much in the early phases. So that is potentially a challenge or an opportunity, depending where you're at. So yeah, great discussion. Thank you to my group.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, all. Right, we're going to go into a 5-minute break now. That's to make sure we've got plenty of time for our next breakout session. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully everybody's been able to rejoin us and been able to step away from your screen for a minute and get a chance to stretch your legs. We will carry on with the rest of our content now. Hopefully anyone else who's still to rejoin us, we can catch them up a bit. So we have talked a little bit about those sort of challenges and opportunities with Kaizen. We wanted to talk a bit more about what makes a successful Kaizen, and what potential pitfalls are there that we can avoid, we can look to avoid. So sort of highlighting the different levels of experience and confidence that we've potentially got in the group. Very open for people chipping into this. If you have any real life examples of pitfalls that you've needed to avoid, that you haven't avoided and learned from, ways to avoid them, please do add those into the chat. I have 3 to share with you from my perspective. So first of all, unclear or no problem statement. That's a really big one. I think Kaizen is, we have such a limited amount of time to try and do quite a lot. Even if you're doing it over an entire day or several days, somehow that time just evaporates. Being able to sort of hit the ground running and have that problem statement ready to go at the start of your event is really critical to keeping that pace and getting through the work that you want to do in the time that you've got allocated for it, and it with the people that you've got in the room. So would always advocate for having a clear, defined, agreed problem statement up front. And I think that can be done remotely, asynchronously on email and Teams and so on. Familiarising people with what the problem statement is and getting them to agree it before they get in the room can really, again, help reduce those questions up front, reduce any confusion, ensure you've got people on the right page, and enable you to work at pace. Secondly, the lack of stakeholder understanding. So we do need quite a few people together for a Kaizen event, different sort of SMEs and with different process knowledge, people from different teams. That's quite a lot of people to get together who may have never done Kaizen before, may never have heard of it before. So you definitely want to invest some time in explaining what it is and what they can expect as well from the session, what the expectations are that they should have of you and the Kaizen session itself, the methodology, the way the day will run. And also the expectations that you have of them for participating. I think that one's really critical because we can tell people it's all day, you'll be in a room, we'll work through this agenda, but they'll still turn up and say, oh, I have a meeting, oh, I need to leave. They'll be looking at their emails and working on their laptop during the session, potentially. whatever we can do up front to challenge those behaviours, and to set expectations that this is something we need to focus our full attention on, not something that we can work during. We're so often tempted to do two things at once and then never actually do either of them as well as we would have liked. I think that's really important to sort of scene set, but also get that expectations setting done so people know what they're letting themselves in for and why it's a valuable use of their time as well. Finally, the wrong people in the room. If you don't have people who are closest to the issue that you're discussing, if you don't have that knowledge about the sort of ins and outs of what's going on, you're never going to have that level of insight. You really need the people closest to the process, closest to the problem. Also, decision makers as well. I think often when you say you're doing some kind of event like this, we have senior colleagues who may want to attend but won't be close enough to the process to really get to the nitty-gritty of the issue. And you may have junior colleagues who need to attend because they are close to that nitty-gritty and the ins and outs of the problem, but they don't have the decision-making authority that we need in the room to be able to progress. So it's finding that balance of who needs to be there. What are you trying to achieve? And do we have access to decision makers? If we don't need them for the full amount of the time, could we invite them in at the end and discuss where we've gotten to, how we've gotten there, and really engage them in that decision-making process to support us? Okay, so alongside those pitfalls, wanted to share some of our top tips as well. Again, if you have any we've gratefully received, please do add them into the chat. So the top tips we've got for you, firstly, preparation. I think it's there's a lot of upfront work that happens before you get into that room, not just your logistics and your agenda setting and wrestling with people's diaries, but also it is that expectation setting, making sure people are clear on what we're trying to do and that you've got everything ready to go so that you can just get going with things when you're in the room. Any opportunity to test things like technology in advance is always good. And even with best intentions, things can fail us, like networks and reception for the internet, as we've run into today. But the better prepared you are, the more you'll be able to kind of work around any issues that come up. Always make sure that you've got someone else, a buddy for that facilitation as well, ensuring that you've got, you're not just on your own, you've got another pair of hands at least to help you, particularly if it's a large room. The next tip we've got is use your checklist. You'll be thinking, but Beth, I do not have a checklist. Don't worry, we'll be emailing you out some useful materials on the back of this session. We've come up with a bit of a checklist of how to put a session together and a proposed agenda, as well as a bit of a scoping document as well. I saw a chat comment ping up about scope. Absolutely agree. It is one of those things, not just in a university environment, but it feels like anytime you're trying to do change, someone will come along and say, can you just do this as well? So we want to be really specific about scope. We want to be really controlled in saying this is exactly what we're looking at and what we're not. I feel problem statements really help with that. And again, hopefully that checklist and that scoping document as well will help you get ready, get set up for running your own event. And finally, our tip is it's got to be face-to-face. You can tell that we are very keen to do remote hybrid events because we're currently in a hybrid remote event. But I think for Kaizen, we really need to get all the people in the room. It's a large investment of time, and it can be difficult to get people all in one place, all at the same time. But it feels like we've seen it time and time again, conversations in person seem less stilted and we're able to move at a greater pace than when we are apart and working virtually. It's much harder to maintain that engagement virtually as well because you've got emails and Teams messages pinging at you. It's ensuring as well that we're setting that expectation that we're all going to get together and we're going to focus just on this. And I think managing that room, managing that focus is, again, a lot more straightforward when everybody's face to face. Have a quick look at the chat. Yep, absolutely. So have mentioned those comments already. Please do keep adding to them. We're always keen to hear what people have to say. And then any of you that were able to watch that Cambridge introduction to Kaizen will recognise where I stole these pictures from. So thank you, Linda. So there's some top tips from Cambridge's video about questioning current practices. Kaizen is fantastic for the opportunity to say, why are we doing it this way? Just because we've done it that way for 10 years doesn't mean we should continue necessarily. We want to be thinking small. This is not necessarily eating the entire elephant. It's understanding how can we break this problem down? How can we do something that is achievable in the group that we have, is realistic for the time and resource that we've got dedicated to it as well. As tempting as it is to solve the big knotty problems, we need to be specific and focused around what we can actually achieve with Kaizen, especially in the time that we've got. I think building up those successes, building up the sort of benefits that you can show on the back of the successes you've had will help you sort of grow. It will help you get more things done. But I would caution not running before you can walk, really, and not trying to do too much at once, being quite specific and targeted within your Kaizen as to what you can achieve. Definitely want to encourage that participation. Again, so much easier in a room to manage everybody as a facilitator than online when we're not necessarily using our cameras and things like this. It's easier to ensure we're keeping people engaged. We're making sure everybody has that opportunity to have a say, to input into what we're doing and isn't being left out when we're in person. We're not looking to seek perfection through doing this either. It is something that may be a first step towards that ideal solution. That's definitely a big cultural shift as well. I think particularly when we're used to, or institutions may be used to, large strategic projects that present a very different look of and way of things at the end. Kaizen may just take a step towards achieving that rather than it being the perfect solution immediately. It may be, how can we actually take those steps towards getting to that ideal state we'd like to? We know it's too big a shift to move from here to there now. So we need to actually take those steps to work towards ideal and just go better than current as our aim, and be comfortable with that as well, and accept that that's actually the right thing to do, and we shouldn't always be seeking perfection. Feels very much like a cultural issue that we have at University of Manchester, is saying everything must be perfect, and if it isn't, we aren't going to be happy with it. Well, no, I think we need to be used to that iterative change. We need to be used to working towards things a lot more, particularly in the climate we have. It's a lot easier to make those smaller changes iteratively and work towards perfection than potentially it is to go straight for it from our starting point. We can definitely include tools and strategies such as 5S and 5 Whys. I absolutely love 5 Whys. I would always use it in a Kaizen. But again, it's understanding what tools are going to be the most useful for the problem that you're facing and for the group that you have together as well. Are there things that will resonate with them more, things that they've understood already? Explaining those concepts clearly and ensuring they have that understanding also helps the success of the session. And finally, talking about success, making sure that we are recognising the successes that we're doing, especially if there is that kind of iterative change, showing that we're building on past improvements, showing that we're continuing to work towards a larger goal, as well as calling out all the good work that we've done so far and all the people who've participated in it. If we are celebrating what we've done, if we are shouting about the successes that we've had, it only garners more positive attention on Lean, CI, these methodologies, whatever you happen to be calling them. It sounds like we're all wanting to engage colleagues more with the benefits that they can deliver. So talking about successes and making those successes visible is so important in that engagement. Right, and that brings us to our next breakout activity. Beth, shall I hand over to you to introduce that one and sort out the breakout groups?
Yeah, so we'll spend 15 minutes on this. I don't think it'll take a full 20 minutes. What we want you to think about in this sort of final activity today is current problems in your organisation that you think would be a fantastic candidate for a Kaizen event. So having listened to us, bang on about be really specific. Are there things that you're aware of recently that you think might be a good candidate? You don't have to share anything that, is, too business sensitive or anything like that. But hopefully then you'll have a good spread of different types of problems, and then amongst yourselves there's some you'll see like little dots on your Miro board sections, and you can just sort of grab them and kind of dot vote for the problems that you think as a group would make a great candidate for a Kaizen. When I say be specific, be prepared to be challenged by your facilitators. So, I don't know, improve the admissions process is not a good candidate for a Kaizen event. I think we can agree. So yeah, I mean, if people have got real life examples as well from past events that have gone well, maybe start with thinking about them first. As a bit of a sort of template, a bit of a benchmark. So yeah, this is just very much a bit more of a creative exercise. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's just really to start to get you thinking about, before you even do a Kaizen event, all that preparatory work that Beth's kind of alluded to, that it really needs to happen before you get there. This is kind of your first step before you even get to building like a good problem statement. So I'll put everyone back in breakout rooms. It's about 25 to 3 now. So if we reconvene at about 10 to 3, is that good enough time? Yeah, so let's see how we get on and have a bit of fun with it.
Okay, I think we've got everybody back because we've had a couple of people need to leave. We'll need to be a little bit more succinct this time just to keep to time. We've only got another 3 slides after this, so it's not loads. Oh, thanks, Tammy. Right, shall we go backwards in order this time around the groups? So, Beth, if you'd like to go first, I'll go last.
Yeah, I'll try and be succinct. Was it difficult? How difficult was it? Very. You need a lot of data and you need to think about it. But I suppose in terms of a broad example, we're generally speaking about exams, such a huge, broad area. But some specific things came up that were really interesting about printing transcripts, and only one person knows how to use a particular printer mechanism or tray. Stamping a certificate or transcript multiple times, and we're not quite sure why. So it's all those types of things where you have to get a bit more curious about it and find some data that demonstrates that there is a problem there.
Great, thanks for that. Tammy, we'll come to you next.
Brilliant, thank you. So we had quite a lot of consensus actually around what we thought the top 3 were. So one of them was that methods way to document processes. So thinking about standard work and how we do that. So we thought we could use runners, repeaters and strangers. So your documents could have 80% that is standard, 15% a little bit more focused on your particular discipline or domain, and then 5% what is your core, what makes it you, sort of thing, or the other way around, especially if you're working with academics maybe. Room bookings was another one that we all think is something that needs to be streamlined and made more accessible. And then we talked a bit around staff-student liaison committees and staff experience as well as student experience. So I've got my SSLCs coming up next week, and then I've only got a week between those committees and our board of studies, and so it doesn't give us much time to tackle some of the issues that are raised. So that's going to be quite an interesting one. But yeah, we had a really good discussion around these problems. So thank you. Great stuff.
Great. Will, over to you.
We had cheated slightly because I'd given a little preview of this activity in the first activity, so everybody came well prepared. So we had some some really interesting ideas, and we were able to get to some quite clear process problems, particularly things like a reading list process, around introducing new payment systems, one about onboarding new members of staff. So they were all things that, a path ahead could be very clear, but a Kaizen would really, really benefit in making sure that you were identifying everything that you needed to and hearing from all the voices that you needed to. So so we had some really good discussion and some good ideas.
Fantastic. Rachel, I believe you're up next.
I think to answer the first question, how difficult to define a clear problem? Yes, incredibly. And I think that's because of the tendency to see all problems as being part of a bigger picture in higher education. Everything is connected. How do you isolate something, a process so specific, rather than trying to address everything all at once and getting nowhere with it? So I think a clear example of that, of the second question, an item that was too broad is the organisation and record keeping around degree apprenticeships. So how the standard student record system isn't set up for degree apprenticeships. So the team are currently using 50 different spreadsheets to organise the apprenticeship journey, which is obviously far too broad of a problem to address in a Kaizen event. However, a introductory Kaizen event could be to determine what are the problems, what should we tackle first out of these 50 spreadsheets, give us a programme of activity and having a discrete workshop to determine the ongoing project around apprenticeships and organising those.
Fantastic, thanks. Linda, over to you.
Okay, so we had it. You're right, as everyone said, it's always difficult to identify a clear problem. Some of our discussion was around some of the bigger processes, but we homed in particularly on exams again, but exams under special conditions. So both the sort of the administration leading up to those exams, but also the operation, separate events could be the actual operation of exams where you have disabled students either coming to the room or being in another room and what's involved in that, because that's a massive administrative overhead. And we spent quite a lot of time talking about that. The other thing was around the availability of resources for academic visitors is something that's a big problem here in Cambridge, so that if academics are coming to do some research or do some study, and quite often they can't get into the building, they can't get on the network, so wasting valuable time. And that's us.
Thank you. I will be as succinct as possible because we are almost out of time. We talked a lot about how ancient systems architecture can really cause a lot of issues, and sort of out of date, out of support systems are not working the way we want them to, and cause kind of a lot of manual workarounds that we need to fix. Some of the top things that we spoke about were around sort of administrative processes around academic promotions, and managing hourly paid academic lecturers for sort of scheduling their time and also paying them, are two that really stood out for us. So that's 3:00. Apologies to anybody that does need to go. Just signposting the upcoming conference. We hope that this was useful for you, and hopefully we'll see some of you next week, virtually or otherwise, in the Lean HE conference.